how do you guys partner rather than here's some tech, implement it or figure out how to implement it? Because once you give us that credit card, we're out.
Peace out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is like, unfortunately, not to name names, like most of our competitors in the space, like that's how they sell, right? It's like, got that credit card, went through, peace out. That's very short-sighted thinking. That's not helping people grow. That's not, and especially when you look at like a Romy, right? They're like a large operator and they're not interested in like being sold to at all.
No.
It's more like,
you're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin.
All right, Steve. Good morning.
good morning, Will.
Good to see you in person.
Dude, it's so nice to have you up here in sunny Vancouver.
Sunny Vancouver. For all of those who are listening, if you can't tell, we're being a little sarcastic. It's not sunny. It's a little gray, a little rainy, a little fog.
Yeah.
But I'm used to it. I grew up over on this side of the world. So, dude, thanks for having me out here at the Operto office out here in Vancouver, BC. I'm excited to chat because the conversations I've been hearing are the same conversations you and I want to talk about.
Yeah.
And I would just love to open up. Let's talk about 2023, right? It's been a little bit of a crazy year, not just for Operto, but the industry as a whole. And compared to 2022, there's been a lot of change. What are you guys seeing in the difference of 2022 to 2023?
Yeah, so I think first off, it's awesome to have you here. You know, a legend in our own office. So it's good to have you up here. Sorry about the weather. Yeah, you know what? I think the interesting thing with 2023 versus, I mean, let's go back 2021, 2022, you know, when there was free money sloshing around in the markets and, you know, revenge travel was a thing. And there was sort of this reckless abandon with which people were traveling and spending money and all the things. That has abruptly e-braked in 2023, 100%, right? And I think where we've seen it affect like big time our customers is the folks who maybe got a little bit drunk with over exuberance in terms of growth. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's really easy to grow in low interest rate environments.
Yeah.
And so we've seen a lot of folks who overshot the runway and have, you know, sort of had to come around and sort of figure out what is my strategy going forward, because what I thought was my strategy in 2022 was definitely not the strategy going forward. So
yeah.
Well,
I want to bring it back. You and I were in Barcelona at Scale Rentals and we were on a panel, and one of the really key big like takeaways that I had was with Dale Smith.
Yeah.
And we've been seeing, you know, property management groups like him just scale like crazy, vertically integrated, and also just doing a ton of acquisition.
Yeah.
And I know having Dale on my show talking about that strategy and how they can obviously organically grow.
Yeah.
But through acquisition, that seems to be the route to get to the numbers and the revenue, you know, 100 million in revenue.
Yeah.
But how realistic is that? Do you think
Yeah, I mean, Dale's obviously a friend and, you know, very, very impressive individual. So,
and I mean, how realistic is that for the United States? I think he's dominating.
I mean,
so
for sure.
Yeah.
I think, you know, so with sort of thinking about that sort of drunk exuberance with which people were sort of scaling and then going, okay, getting hit with a little bit of a reality slap in 2023. Mm-hmm. It's opened up an opportunity for operators like Dale and all over the world who are more of a professionally minded organization to start to vacuum up the smaller operators who don't have necessarily the cash reserves, the market penetration, the the things you need to be successful in a more challenging operating environment. And, and so what we're seeing and, is those sort of more the smaller onesie, maybe 1 to 10 to even 20 unit property managers are being sort of vacuumed up.
Yeah.
And so with that, I think it's good. I mean, it's always lovely to see, a broad base of operators out there, but it's also cool to see, even if you look at like CasaGo or some of these like other guys who are Casiola, who are professional, professionals in every sense of the word. They're doing incredibly well right now because there's this sort of shift to quality over quantity. And and it's something, I don't think I would have predicted 18 months ago, but it's absolutely playing out right in front of our eyes.
So what does that impact have of the shift of quality over quantity have when it comes to not even just Operto customers, but now I think as new brands are popping up, we're seeing a little bit of funding come back into the space.
Yeah.
And whether it's a bootstrap company or even just private equity or venture capital backed property management, group, they're not trying to scale at all costs, right? They're not burning through the capital.
For sure. And it doesn't matter like where you sit in that story. The growth at all costs model was a low interest rate model, right? Where nobody thought that the government would ever turn off the printing press. And so everyone was just like literally throwing money at the problem and just like hoping that things stuck on the wall.
Yeah.
Fast forward 12 months, the dog days of winter are here and where the market is shifting for sure. And this is whether it's in PE or venture or bootstrap companies, it is that quality versus quantity measure and profitability, right? Like what is your road to break even, positive EBITDA, all those pieces that are actually important versus like just shoveling more cash into the fire and hoping that something happens. And I think again, it's and we're seeing how that plays out in the short-term rental market because you're seeing the well-capitalized companies that are growing efficiently do really well. And the ones that maybe didn't manage to raise money during the good times are the ones who are actually a little bit more struggling to sort of keep up with this new market reality.
Yeah. Well, one of the favorite kind of talking points I've been having recently is I was watching a podcast called This Week in Startups with Jason Calacanis. He had the CEO of Kayak on. And there's one maybe minute, 45-second snippet in that episode where the CEO of Kayak says, no one's figured out how to be profitable. Sonder, Vacasa, all these companies have not figured it out, and they're public, and they are backed by hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet they're still not figuring it out. And so, as you mentioned, Casiola, CasaGo, any kind of brand that is focusing on profitability is really, really succeeding. And I think paving a way, especially with franchise models and a couple other different, structures. Sure. I would love to know, do you think in this current period, 2023, we're on the tail end, Q4, about to go into 2024, do you think we're going to see a slowdown in the type of growth in companies, but more of like that quality focus where it's just like, hey, we're going to put our heads down and we're just going to go in and focus on profitability?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the path forward. And let's be honest, it's not, with all the things that are sort of happening in the Middle East right now and in Ukraine, and there's lots of sort of global uncertainty just generally across, the broader world, doesn't matter really where you sit in that alone is going to cause that sort of contraction of the market. And when you have that kind of dynamic, you've got the focus really does turn from growth to quality. And I think that, you're going to see, and also like, when you've got a really efficiently run business, those are the businesses that can then start to look to expand and swallow up the less efficient operators. And so is there going to always be a market for, I've got a basement suite and I'm going to huck it up on Airbnb? For sure. That's never going anywhere. It's a side hustle. People are going to, for sure, do that just to earn some extra cash. But where I think you're going to see the interesting market shift is going to be from the ones who are trying to go from 1 to 5 to 10 to 50, because sort of like at about 50, you're like a professional property manager. That growth is really difficult because it's hard to find efficiency in that bucket.
Yeah.
Once you get to the bigger, like where you're doing your own laundry, you've consolidated or built your own tech stack, you've got your own full-time employees, you've got like all those things. That's where the efficiency starts to come into the business. And you can, even if you're operating in a low margin environment, which is unfortunately where we're at right now, ADRs are down, interest rates are up, cap rates are down, like occupancy is low. Like it's like every possible tailwind is hitting our market right now. And so that favors efficient operators. And when I looked, our LinkedIn feeds, I'm sure, are just filled with the same folks. And, again, going back to the Casa Go or the Casiolas, like they figured it out.
Yeah.
And so for them, they're like, all these headwinds are actually like, all right.
Yeah.
Because it means that they can broaden where they're looking to grow, and they'll always find inefficient operators in all those markets.
Yeah.
And so it's again, just different than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and we see these posts, right? Brooke from Vintori, and talking about scaling. And I go to a lot of short, like small group meetups, right, in Denver or other destinations, where a lot of these operators are at that 5, 10, 15, 20 range and trying to get to that 50 mark. The main thing I'm hearing from them and like having these conversations is like, oh, I'm just trying to get to this unit count. And I'm like, well, like, let's take a look at your current units. What ones aren't performing? What ones are really kind of causing you this headache and stress? And I know for a lot of people watching or listening, that's back second nature, right? Like, all right, if they're not working, cut them.
Yeah.
But a lot of these new operators that are trying to build a brand, whether it's in unique stays and destination creation, they're just so focused on the number that they kind of forget, like right in front of them, they have some fat to cut. And
you know what? The unit count is probably the least important number of all of them.
Yeah.
Like it's almost a throwaway number, because if you have 5 units that are run incredibly efficiently, that are great free cash flow, and then you've got 25 units that are not run efficiently, you're going to make more money by running a smaller operation than you will, and it's like, I almost look at like unit count almost as a vanity metric. Like it is and it isn't, but like when an operator's starting out, and especially when they're trying to go from a small handful to a bigger, it's more about how your operation is run versus the brand you're trying to build.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think that, again, this isn't a Casico plug, but like when you look at like, what Steve and Ryan have done, they built the infrastructure first.
Yeah.
And then they brought on the marketing piece after. And so they did the hard part up front, and then they layered the brand on top. I mean, that was called, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
100%.
It's like cart before the horse.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, when you're looking at like, how do you actually scale? Like you have to know your numbers better than the manager at the bank does, for sure. And I think that, when folks are looking to get into the short-term rental game, like you got to know your numbers, like, and people bang on about it at conferences, but it's so true. Because if you don't know those, then you're kind of a sitting duck.
Yeah, 100%. And we hear a lot of the times, a lot of people, before they get to that 50 mark, right? Like every property should basically have its own P&L.
Yeah.
100% own P&L, whether you're in one destination or if you're spread out. We're spread out. And I will say it sucks. Because it's like, okay, you have different markets being impacted by different things. And I get that. And so like when we're working through our business, it's like, all right, where do we want to consolidate? Where do we want to build density and depth?
Yeah.
Because the spread out thing is great, but like the properties don't really fit when it comes to the efficiencies and building out the brand.
For sure.
And I was going to, sorry to
jump in.
I was going to say the one other thing too, when the people do the marketing before they do the efficiencies, like you're just talking about with Casico, you'll see that the marketing is inconsistent. It doesn't, it's like, oh, we're doing great. And then something breaks. And then they're like, all right, no marketing, ghost. And then, all right, it's working again. And then they're back. And so I think
people stay at your properties because it's an amazing stay, not because you've built an amazing brand to lure them in, right? They're going to remember the small touches. How clean was the unit? How, like, did it have all the things that made my stay comfortable, versus like, oh, that pink that they chose for the color palette was so awesome, right? So like, again, cart before the horse on a lot of that stuff. And, I tip my hat to any of those professional folks who have really, really done well and navigated. Again, like you bring up Brooke from Venturi, right? Like the service that they provide is incredible. It really does make such a huge impact for a scaling operator. That, you know, they've done really well because those people come in search of folks who really know what they're talking about and really can help you look around those blind corners. And that for me is like, it's great to see the good people doing well.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, and it also helps, you know, Brooke's done it before. It's not like,
totally.
It's
like,
not like, oh, I'm just going to create this idea. And like,
like he knows.
actually, knows. Yeah.
For sure.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
So kind of going into this whole conversation of quality versus quantity, scale, operations, then marketing, cart before the horse, all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
With you, like you guys have, I would say probably the biggest pulse on the industry, especially with this blend of hotel, short-term rental, you know, building out a brand, not just being a host, right? Because like I think the host game, like you said, is always going to be there.
Yeah.
There's always like the property I'm staying at here in Vancouver, amazing. Like married couple with a kid and an adopted dog named Rocco. Shout out to Rocco. You know, like just it's great experience. They do it as a side hustle. It's fun. It's cool, and you know they get good guests that are quiet and hopefully clean, right?
Yeah,
like
sure.
That's all they want to do. Now you have these bigger brands. You guys are experienced, and they either are on site, they're remote, they're a mix, they're a blend, they're multifamily, single family, all this stuff. Where is the conversation leading with them within the Operto sphere that you guys kind of have like a big pulse on? I would love to.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, when you're, so the conversations that we are having are much more like, rewind 12 months ago, like people would literally call us with their credit card in their hand. And be like, sign me up, you know, like, because the money I'm using to pay for your service, I probably got at 0 interest rates, right? Fast forward, the way that we're helping our customers now is 100% as like trusted partner consultative selling. So we don't, very, very rarely do they come looking with their credit card in their hand. It's like, you kind of, not that you got to pry it out of their pocket, but like, it's a multi-stage kind of like really trying to understand, where are you today? What are there any of those warning signs in your business? A lot of the things we just talked about around like efficient growth versus, you know, growth at all costs. Where are you now? Where do you want to be in 6 months? Where do you kind of, what's your runway look like? What's your profitability? And like actually getting into much deeper conversations around their business. And then going like, we do tech, right? And tech is an important part of that piece for sure, especially when you're looking at like, how do we cut fat and run more efficiently? We get it and we can help, but we only want to be part of a solution versus like, we're not all things to all people. Like that is for sure. Like
I was just,
we do a slice of the pie. But if you don't
Mm-hmm.
have like the rest of the pie figured out, it doesn't matter how good Operto is. We're not going to get you to the Graceland, right? It's not going to happen. So we need to understand how we fit into your plans. And then like we like, for instance, like Venturi, like we push a lot of our customers to Venturi because if they scale, we scale. And who's the best at helping people scale? Brooke. Right. And so like, so we try and work with our partners to bring those pieces in so that we can actually give them a holistic, like, here's your growth pie, and we're a piece of it.
I'm so glad you said that because, you know, I'm not going to name names, but I will say there are definitely people in the industry on the vendor side or even the operator side that preach that they are the solution. And I think that type of marketing and that type of message is completely false. You're not the solution. You are a part of the solution. And I love that you just said that because it brings me back to the conversation again with Brandy, you, me, Michael Golden out at in Barcelona. Just what Brandy said and what you guys said is like, how does Operto scale with Romy? How does Romy scale and make sure Operto is matched, right? Like, how do you guys partner rather than here's some tech, implement it or figure out how to implement it? Because once you give us that credit card, we're out.
Peace out. Which is like, unfortunately, you know, not to name names, like most of our competitors in the space, like that's how they sell, right? It's like, got that credit card, went through, peace out. that's very short-sighted
Yeah.
thinking. That's not helping people grow. That's not, and especially when you look at like a Romy, right? They're like a large operator and they're not interested in like being sold to at all.
No.
It's more like, hey, we've got 500-600 units. How, like, you have to run your business so efficiently at that scale that literally every dollar matters. And, so if we can help again to a point, but then like, how do we work with them to introduce them to other people we're working with, or like things that we're seeing in the market, which might be helpful to them. And it's like, it's one of the things we talk about at Operto is we all talk about monthly recurring revenue because that's like, we're a SaaS business.
Yeah.
Right? But what I'm talking with my marketing and my sales team is monthly recurring value, right? So like instead of the only time we talk to our customers is like once a year when it's time to renew.
Yeah.
We're like, hey buddy, how are the kids? And they're like, FO, like you haven't talked to me in 11 months.
Yeah.
Like you're only calling because you want my credit card details and maybe my credit card expired, and like you're making small talk, versus like having a customer who you're talking with all the time. And that's like, again, when you look at like the kind of economy we're dealing with right now, people will cut you out as soon as you do not add value.
100%.
Like, and yeah, people, and I'm sure everyone listening to this, like the churn in the market this year has been brutal because we've seen lots of people leaving the space, consolidation, like all of it's kind of happening. But the folks who are weathering the storm are the ones who add real value, and their customers couldn't even fathom unplugging them.
100%.
Like, because it's fundamentally important that vendor is in their life, versus, and so like, that's where we try and be more of a partner. Everyone says partner, but like we really actually live that in our DNA. That's really important to us. And it pays dividends, right? And so when they are ready to grow and when times are good, it's like whoosh, not like, hey buddy, like, remember me? And they're like, where were you when my business was struggling?
Yeah.
Like, where were you? You weren't around. But so we build those long-term relationships. We have very, very loyal customers, and that's how we position ourselves.
Yeah. Well, like the long-term goal or the long-term look, right? Like it is long-term, and a lot of people can get short-sighted, but the long-term vision like that actually pays short-term results too, as well. So like, I think it's you're right. You guys are a business. You run SaaS, MRR is the number one thing, that and ARR, all this other stuff, right? But at the end of the day, those actually add up, and they compound. They compound so quick. And it's crazy because like I'm not a big operator. I'm not even daily operating my management company. I have a great co-founder who gets to pretty much
deal with it all.
He gets to. It's
lucky
it's an honor. But when we do evaluations of our tech stack, he will mention like, oh, this is like kind of costing us a lot, and I'm like, well, how would your day look if you didn't have it, right? Like, and that's where those conversations open up, because then I can call that vendor and be like, hey, we need to talk about X, Y, and Z. Like, this is where we're working or where we're seeing our growth and blah, blah, blah. And it actually ends up bringing a win-win result. And I think Alex from Wednesday, on his episode, he goes, it's not that it's rah-rah and kumbaya, but like when win-wins do happen, and they do, like a lot of people think that, oh, well, someone's getting the short end. It's not actually true. And I think you just have to have the hard conversations. Yeah. Because when that 11-month time period comes by, that conversation is a lot harder than the short-term one. Like, hey.
And totally not authentic. 100%. Right? Like, this market is so interesting right now because, and it doesn't matter which, like, short-term rental market's really this small kind of like island that we all live on.
Everyone knows everybody.
Yeah, everyone knows everyone, and it's just a nonstop, party. But once you leave our little island and you move to, it doesn't matter which sort of technology island you live on. This notion of like providing customer value and like real value is true across any industry. And I think, until we kind of come out of this malaise of, wherever their global economy is in right now, the people who are able to figure out that balance of like providing great solutions, and the tech's got to be there and all the things, but like actually positioning themselves at the dinner table when the decisions are being made, and they're like, of course we're going to continue with Operto or whoever because they're part of the family. That's a totally different conversation,
100%.
right? And so that's how we try and roll.
Yeah. Hence why I'm here, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's super good and very well said. I don't think I could say anything else to make it better. So, you know, this is a fun conversation. I know we're going to have more of these. We're on the way to VRMA.
Talk about Party Island.
Yeah, seriously. Everyone in the industry in one room.
Yeah.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be a good time.
Can't wait for the Liquid IV to come out. It's
Yeah,
be,
exactly.
Amazing.
See all our friends again.
100%.
Yeah.
So with that happening, there's going to be more conversations, I guarantee. Like, I'm excited to be in the room with everybody, gearing up for kind of the further conversation. And my number one thing I always kind of talk about, and anyone on the podcast will know, is beyond the audio, right? Like, people are listening to this, and the ones that are listening to it are not going to be the ones that are like shouting from the rooftops. They're the ones that are head down, weathering the storm.
For sure.
They don't reach out and, you know, post stuff. They're just like, all right, this is great. Need to hear it.
Yeah.
Grind.
They're in the blender.
Yeah, they're in the blender.
Yeah. For sure.
Nikki, finger. Just kidding. But, you know, that's going to be the part where I think like the VRMA, when everyone's coming together and now not able to communicate on LinkedIn or podcasts or whatever kind of channel method, but the actual in-person stuff that is unscripted, it's unrecorded, it's unprovoked, it just happens.
Yeah.
Would you say what would you say there's one thing you're hoping from the VRMA kind of sessions or the conversations, I don't know, when the beers are flowing, that you're looking forward to the most?
To be honest, I think it's some of the stuff we just talked about.
Yeah.
I will be very interested to talk to some of our peers around like just the changing customer landscape. For sure. I think there's and how folks are actually servicing those people, right? What are they doing to create real value in a very difficult operating environment?
Yeah.
How are they helping their customers look around corners that maybe aren't necessarily in their swim lane? And we do that. Again, we try to do that as much as we can. A lot of the times when our CS team is talking to our customers, they're talking about stuff that has nothing to do with Operto. And I've said that's totally fine. Like that is, have those conversations, because when it's time to talk about us, you can talk about us.
Yeah.
So I think that for me will be really interesting. I mean, obviously we're going to hear a bunch of AI gobbledygook, you know, wow, AI.
Because if you don't say it 7 times, it's not a real panel or a podcast. Right?
Totally. And I can barely wait to sit in the back and yawn about all that crap. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting stuff, but it's not really relevant for this environment.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this, the word value has been thrown around a lot, not just in this conversation, but in the industry and outside the industry. You look at any company outside of short-term rentals or hospitality, everyone's like, lead with value.
Totally.
And you've already said the definition, but you're not leading with value by providing just a great solution, but you're actually problem solving outside of your scope, where that's like, I think where, like you said, the seat at the table opens up.
Totally.
Because if you're not doing that, you're just like, well, I don't know where that goes into access control or team solutions or anything else. So I guess like Google it, you know,
call me never.
Yeah.
100%. No, for sure.
So
we actually just had a couple of our team got flown down to Miami to turn on a new hotel we were working with. And, you know, the contractor didn't really work out some of the IoT we're putting in. I mean, and our customer was like left up shit creek pretty bad. And so we put two guys in the hotel for 2 weeks, and they put 7,500 screws into doors to get the project live.
Jeez.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and like,
100%.
I mean, these poor dudes came back to Vancouver, like their hands are like literally falling off their arms and they're wrecked. And it's like, but you know, the takeaway is customer for life.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, like doesn't matter what goes on from here on out. Like they've got the battle scars. We went absolutely above and beyond things we normally wouldn't have done. But in this economy, and those are the kind of things where like you step out of your comfort zone and you help someone out to truly help them out. You're good to go.
Yeah. And that's the thing. A lot of people try to put, you know, I think there's a part about business, right, where you have to know the numbers. You said that. You have to know your numbers. But that's one thing that's not measurable. You can't measure. You can by like lifetime value of them being with you guys.
Yeah.
But you can't measure how much they're going to be vocalizing to their other hotel buddies.
Oh.
And all the other stuff that's going to happen. Like that's an immeasurable impact.
Yeah.
And I remember, during COVID, I installed 200 noise sensors in a hotel by myself, and your guys' team helped. I would call in to remotely on Google Meets and be like, how do I do this? It's a lot different when it's one house versus
for sure.
200 hotel rooms. So
yeah,
that just is I think the people that are very number or data centric need to kind of look up from the computer screen sometimes and understand like the unmeasurable value and the unmeasurable problem solving.
Yeah.
That's where it's going to have the bigger ripple for sure.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. We'll see. This has been fun.
You bet, man.
I'm so excited to continue to hang out while in Vancouver. But
I'm not gonna lie, you look good in the Operto t-shirt.
Hey,
that is like,
hey,
it's
maybe
like brings this small tear to my eye that you're not only in Vancouver, you're rocking the garb. So
well, I was gonna say, if podcasting and media doesn't work out for me,
totally.
I know exactly where I'm coming.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks,
thank you
buddy.
so much, Steve.
We'll
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.